330 medical responses in the last month. Motor vehicle accidents with injuries, so there's been 54. And then other emergencies, we've had 12 wires down and 2 water lines. So those are some of the things that we have had to deal with over the last month. This month, for June's newsletter, when it comes out, I sent in some information about summertime and what people like to do in the summer is grill, and just some grilling safety tips and grilling information. Average, there's 10,600 fires a year caused by grilling. There's 19,700 ER visits people get injured from grilling. 9,500 of those are actual thermal burns. Children under 5 account for 2,000 of those. So that's 39%. If you're out grilling, set up a 3-foot perimeter around that grill. Don't let those kids come inside that area. Something we don't think about, but it's a good thing to do because little kids get rambunctious. Same thing with your pets. They might get rambunctious, hit that grill, knock it over. We don't want that to happen either. Some of the other safety tips, gas grills, typically the problems with them are the hose lines going to them. So check the hose lines, make sure they're good. What you can do if you want to know how to check that, get some soapy water put on there. It's making bubbles, you know you have a leak in your hose. Make sure the grill top is open before you light your grill. A lot of people don't think about that. If you're using a gas grill and that top's down, you start it up and stick your lighter in there, you use the trigger. If that gas is built up inside there, it can cause a mess for you. So check your hose release. If you're using charcoal grills, use a chimney starter. Try not to use lighter fluid. Chimney starter with a little bit of newspaper underneath there. I use them all the time. They are great. They also have, I didn't know this, I learned this. They have electric starters for charcoal grills. So who knew? I'm sure they're probably not cheap, and I don't know. When you're finished with your grill, if it's gas grill, make sure you turn it off. Make sure you turn the gas off as well. And charcoal grill, make sure that charcoal is completely out before you leave it. And try not to leave that overnight. I have made, since I've been on the fire department, we made a fire and the guy was really kind of upset at us, but he left his grill on, caught his deck on fire, which ran up into his house. We had to go into his house and pull down part of the ceiling. That's when he got upset. But the fire had traveled up into his attic space. And so we would have pulled down part of the ceiling and left, he would have had fire later. So let's try to protect our stuff and keep those grills safe and keep ourselves and our family safe while grilling. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce the Evansville Water and Sewer Utility speakers.
So my name is Lane Young. I'm gonna try to make sure I stand in a place where you all can see, but I can also see my notes. And I am somewhat new, although I guess it was basically September of 2020 when I started my role. So somewhat new, Executive Director of the Evansville Water and Sewer Utility. I also have here tonight Mike Labitzke, who is our Director of Program Management, and Mike is kind of the architect. He's the guy, the engineer that understands our system well. So I brought him tonight because we want this mostly tonight to be about you all asking questions and us being able to kind of get as much information as we can. Also, who is running the slideshow, Ella Johnson Watson is our public information officer. So she's here tonight, and she has some information that she can hand out once we are finished. I do want to thank you all. Thank you all for letting me come and share this. One of the things when I was offered this position and started in it, I learned quickly how what we do every day touches every citizen in Evansville. I'm not sure there are any other departments who do it every day. I think some probably do it regularly, but every day, every citizen depends on our service. And so for me, who most of my career has been about serving and developing people, that was a huge draw to me, but also a really big responsibility, one that we take seriously. So I'm thrilled to see people here tonight. I don't know who all is on Zoom, but glad to know that there's an organization of neighborhoods in Evansville that we can interact with, because we want to be good stewards of this resource, and we want to serve you all well. So that's a goal of ours, and certainly one of mine. Tonight, as I mentioned, I really want this to be more about you all having a chance to ask questions of us than presentation. I am going to give a little presentation just to kind of guide our discussion, but you all are welcome to ask us questions, whether it's part of what we are talking about tonight or not. So just quickly, the agenda, I want to touch just briefly on infrastructure. I think if we're all watching the news right now, that's a big topic across the country. So I want to touch briefly on that. A little bit more specifically about our infrastructure here in Evansville. This project that is the water treatment plant, which is really the driver of why we need to do a rate case and ultimately raise rates to pay for it. The impact that will have, and then just some next steps. So the national infrastructure problem, I'm not going to spend too much time. You can kind of see some of that information, but this is something that's been around for a while, and the country has felt this, and Evansville is no different. I think what we see across the country, which is why the federal government is finally thinking about addressing it, is communities have for decades really not invested in their infrastructure in the ways that they should. And I'm not here to talk about that too much. I'm not really here to say anything negative about that. In fact, I think this here tonight represents a reason why it's a challenge to do that, because it has a real impact on people and on their livelihood and on their ability to pay for things. And so when authorities are thinking about how do we pay for this, how do we improve our investment or our infrastructure, it takes a lot. And so I just want to say whatever's happened in the past has happened in the past, and that I think I understand why it has, just with this new role. But what's happened is we've had decades of not investing in ways that we should. And water and wastewater in particular across the country, because I think roads, and although we all see our roads and know that they can always use improvement, roads are seen by everybody. You drive on it, you kind of know it, you touch it. Most of our infrastructure is unseen. And so as long as it's working, everyone thinks, well, if we can just get a little bit more out of it, because that's a tough decision to make. You can just get a little bit more out of it. And so I recognize why we are where we are today, but we've reached a point where we really can't do that anymore. And that, back in 2009, the federal government came in, and you all are probably aware of the consent decree. I'll touch on it a little bit. But they came in and basically got to Evansville and said it's time that Evansville complies with the Clean Water Act, something that was, I think, established back in the late 70s even. And so the EPA worked their way through the big offenders, and then they kind of got down to the mid-range cities, and they hit us. And so we found ourselves sued by the federal government to fix our sewer side. So that's fixing our sewer problem. And even that, I'm not sure if everybody understands, but that really was to address overflows that were happening because of the way our system is built. That really doesn't touch too much on just kind of the miles of pipe that we have to maintain. They really cared about, are we putting water that's mixed with sewage and rainwater back in the rivers and the streams? And so that's what they cared about. And that's a large part of what the consent decree addresses. But also, once we kind of got in that with them and got started, I think 2011 was when we had an initial program, and then around 2015, it was redone. We started with some projects, although I think we started even in 2011. Mike's the guy that would know better than I would. So we started that project. So even then is when you saw your sewer side of your bill start to elevate. But we also realized that we have, and Ella, if you want to go to the next slide, we have so I talked about the 900 miles of sewer pipe, many of which are 100 years old. There's pipes that we have that were built in the 20s that are still functioning today in the downtown area. So those structures are very, very old. But we also have over 1,000 miles of water pipe. Some of that, a good chunk of that's well over 70 years, 75 years old, some of it older than that. And so let me just quickly point this out, because I think miles of pipe doesn't sort of compute to people on size, but let me say this. Suffolk County, Massachusetts, where Boston is resides within that county, has the same number, roughly within 50 miles of pipe, the same amount of pipe, water pipe that we have here in our area. And yet they have 6 times the number of people to help support that infrastructure. So in 2016, we realized we need to not just have the federal government tell us to fix our overflow problem, but we also need to fix our water problem. So that's when we started our refresh program. I think many of you are probably familiar with that program. That's the one where we are working on miles of pipe in our system. Probably your neighborhoods have been affected by that at different times, depending on where we are in our program. So we initiated that program in 2016, but we also looked at our water treatment plant. Because in reality, that water treatment plant is our system. It is the heart. It is what puts water into our system that then goes out to customers who use it. It becomes dirty. It comes back in our sewer pipes and comes to our treatment plants. So without that water plant, the work that the EPA is wanting us to do doesn't really matter, because we're not putting anything out for it to overflow and create a problem. The heart of the whole system is the water treatment plant. And so we knew that it's over 120 years old, parts of it. In 1897 was when the big, beautiful red brick building that sits on the riverfront, the largest of those structures, was finished and operational. So we did some studies. We looked at, well, are there alternative ways for us to provide water? And we looked at groundwater as an option to help supplement the river water that we take. But there just was not enough groundwater in our area for us to be able to go that route. So we decided that replacing this plant was what we needed to do. So Ella, thank you for switching to that slide. So if y'all can see, I don't know how clear it is back there, but the red kind of outline, which starts up in the upper left corner, the big structure I referenced, works its way down in the middle where most of the roof line is. Those were parts of our system that were started in operational in 1897, and improvements were made through the 20s. Some of that is still functioning today. So that top part, kind of closest to the river where the red is, it's grass, but underneath that is a secondary settling system that's concrete. And that concrete was put in that time frame between 1897 and 1920s. So it's well past its useful life. Other structures were built in the 30s through 50s, a good part of what our settling and clarifying happens. And so you can see that even the newest parts of our plant, this little spot right here, which was some extra filter beds, that was built in the 90s. So even the newest parts of that plant are over 30 years old. Next slide, please. So this is just so that's sort of the top of the plant. So those structures there were built in the 30s and 40s, that concrete. So that concrete's 90 years old. And so we know that the useful life of those products and those materials has come and gone. And so it's time for us to replace the plant. I think, Ella, if you want to go to the next slide. So like I said, it reached some of its useful life. We've even had parts of our process where a couple of years ago, you saw the circular and kind of square parts. There's an arm that moves in there that helps move the water around and takes the dirt that settles off the bottom and gets it out of the way. Well, a piece of metal broke off and got caught, and then it caused the rotor and the motor to shear off. And so that happened, and when that happened, that took us down about 25% of our capacity to produce and distribute water. That was not an off-the-shelf repair. So we had to go out, spend money to have it fabricated, which kept it down for a long time before it got back online. So there are other elements of that plant that the same thing could happen, and maybe even worse. And so we realized it's time to replace it. And so we started that study. Like I said, the groundwater was insufficient. And when we looked at other places that we might be able to build, it really didn't work because our entire distribution system comes out of that plant. So all of the pipes that then take the water and get it out into our network, they start right there. The head of those are at the plant. So if we were to move and build a plant somewhere else, we would have to then connect into those, and that would be a costly build. And so the best place for us is to build right across the street, which is currently the city garage occupies that space. So that is the plan right now, is for us to find new space for the city garage and construct our water plant right there. If you want to go to the next slide. So I want to get into, and I'm happy to talk more and more. Like I said, I want to open this up into questions. But one of the things that, as we've been talking to people, and questions that have come up is, what's going to happen to my bill? And so when we made our presentation, we talked about a monthly increase maximum that would happen per month. But people who are math people know that there's a percentage increase that's going to happen over 5 years. And so what I thought I would do, just because it will help, when I'm talking to people, a lot of time they go, this is unaffordable. All of a sudden my bill's going to be 30% higher. Well, what I want to show and demonstrate is that it won't be 30% higher. So if you look up at the top there, right now, if you use 4,000 gallons of water a month, your water bill is $38.92. Your sewer for that same amount of usage is $50.19. Come down with the proposal that we're making. So right now, your current bill, if you use that amount, is the $124.84. So it's $41 for the water, because there's a little bit of tax on there. And it's $83 total for the sewer. And as you can see, included in that is $13 for trash and almost $20 for the sewer mandate, or the consent decree. So with the proposal that we have before the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, water will go from $38.92 to $52.89. A little bit of tax, so your total bill will be $56.59 on the water side. Add that to the sewer side, that's $83.20, and your new bill will be $139.79. Now, we recognize that is not an insignificant increase by any stretch, and we recognize that there are households in our community today that's a burden. So we do understand that, and we take it very seriously. But I just wanted to help make sure that people do understand when they kind of hear things and they get reports of numbers, it's the water side that is increasing on this. So, that's about $14, $15, a little less than $15. So, let's see, next slide, Ella. So Evansville has an affordability problem. I think probably most people in our city recognize some of that. Some recognize it a lot greater than others. 25% of the city's population is at or below the national poverty level. One of the things I think, to go back just to make sure people understand, the reason why I mentioned that about Boston is we don't get tax money out of the water and sewer does not get any tax money to help operate. All of our operations and all of the maintenance of our system is funded by users. It's all ratepayer based. And so one of the reasons that we say we have a problem is that we have the same size system as Boston, but Boston is 6 times larger than Evansville. So they have 6 times the base in which to help support that infrastructure than we do. Right now, what we're hoping to do, we do have a few small things on utility rate assistance, but it's not enough. We recognize that. There are ways we can't help people, but for people who sit at that 25%, right now, we don't have a way to really help mitigate our affordability problem. For the first time since the 80s, I think, the federal government has recognized the infrastructure problem and the bills are going and none of them have been passed yet, but I think we've been reading about them in the paper. There's finally talk of funds that are available. And those are one way to really help this project. If we could get grant funding, let's say we could get 80% of that project funded by grants, and we would only have to pay for 20% of that project. That would be a huge help. And so we are working hard. We have applications into the agencies, the different groups to get help. So we are looking at that. It's one reason why I wanted to come tonight though, because we need your help to tell our affordability story. We need to be able to show and demonstrate to the federal government that Evansville has a problem. And a part of that problem was put on us by the federal government because of the Clean Water Act. And so those are some things that I hope we can do together to help this problem. I will say our long-term solution is for Evansville to grow. If we have a lot more ratepayers, then we could spread that infrastructure out over a much broader base. And that's the long-term solution. So I think with that, I'll just throw up the next step. So we're in this process with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, and right now we're probably in the utility. We filed our case in chief with them, so right now there's in a whole process where they gather information. I would assume that at some point they will be down here, or actually it will be the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor will come down here and get information and do a fact-finding mission to come down here and try to understand the impact of this rate case that we filed. If all goes well, it looks like October 12th is when we would have hearings. And then by December, the IURC will have received everything, and then they have 90 days to give a ruling as to whether they will allow this rate increase and therefore allow us to move forward in building this water treatment plant. So that's just kind of a little bit of it. I know that's a lot of information, so I'm happy to go over any of it. Mike and Ella, we're happy to answer questions, but I wanted to give you all that information and then kind of open it up to questions if there are any. I'm happy to sit around and answer them afterwards as well. Yes, back there.
You mentioned Boston. You've just mentioned Boston a couple of times. It's having the same number of pipes, and yet it's 6 times more people. I'd like you to explain that a little more. I don't understand. We have inefficient piping. Why do we have the same amount of piping as a city that's 6 times?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So if you've traveled in the East and the age of the East Coast is very dense. So when those cities expanded, they just did it bits at a time, and they stayed very, very tight. And so for us, and on the one hand, we could say we should have done the same, but it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, because if you're going to grow, you want to have infrastructure out there. So over time, as we've had developments go out north and east and west, further out, we have to get pipe out to those developments. So there's several developments out on the north side. Let's just take North High School and a lot of those housing that's out there right now. Well, if you drive from the river, from downtown here, and you drive out 41, you quickly see, all right, the density starts to spread out a little bit. And all of a sudden you go long stretches where there's a lot of even farmland still, or just open ground that doesn't have housing and other development on it, to get those pipes out to where you do have now development. So that's our challenge, is that our infrastructure was put in to take it far out, but the growth and development didn't match that. So that's why we are where we are. I use Boston just because I think, like I said, pipes underground, nobody sees them. Nobody, like you said, are pipes inefficient? Are they not run right? What's the situation? So I use that just to kind of show it's really the density.
So the folks who are further out that insisted that they have city water, are they paying different rates? If we had to put a gazillion dollars into putting pipes out, are they paying a different rate than somebody that's produced?
I'm going to let Mike answer that, although, well, so being new, I know enough to be dangerous. Here's what I do recognize, that there is an additional charge that is the county pays, different than the city, but what I don't quite know, is that a sewer? Is that for sewer, or is that for water, or both? But I do know there is a difference. It's not enough to make up for the cost of that infrastructure, certainly, but there is.
Real quick, I just looked it up. Evansville is 44.6 square miles, Boston 48 square miles. So it's really
Not really different,
no, you just have a whole lot more people.
within the same amount.
What's the ratio of people that are in poverty in Boston? Is it 1.4?
I don't know, in today's world, I'm sure once somebody, by the time I finish talking on the next question, somebody can look on their phone and get an answer, because all those statistics usually are there. But yeah,
I've noticed, and I don't know any of these people, but I assume they're telling the truth. On social media, Nextdoor and Facebook, I've seen since, I would say, the first of the year, a lot of people getting on saying, did you get your water bill? My water bill tripled. My water bill doubled. I've seen this quite frequently. And the last one I saw this week was somebody's water bill was due to be in 100 something, and it went up to 400. So I don't ask questions because I don't know. I whatever they're doing wrong. Have you had a lot of people call in about this?
we do have people call in when those things happen. And probably each situation is a little different, but my guess is those are a result of a leak somewhere in their system inside. I talked to a guy who has a sump pump, and it was a hidden sump pump. And I don't know all the details of it, but it was continually running. Even though there wasn't a rain, it wasn't pumping anything out, it wasn't needing to, there wasn't a rain event, but it was hidden somewhere, and he didn't know where it was. And it was adding $200 to $300 to his monthly bill. So that's just one example that I know. So I don't know all of what it could be, but that would be, it's not around us changing rates. Those haven't changed. So I don't know what that would be, but that guy is one example of that, a significant bill around a broken sump pump.
But they still could call in and have.
They
somebody
can,
come
and
out
he did.
check the meter.
That's exactly right, and he did that. And he had a plumber come out. And there's a plumber's affidavit that you fill out and bring it in. We look at it and we adjust his bill.
Some of them might be in the county, but some of them may be in the city also.
Yeah, right there.
My name is Sarah Corrigan. I live over in the UNOE neighborhood area. There's a problem with these alleged smart meters. And we had it happen at our house. I know of one other neighbor, the bills just skyrocketed. The water department was incredibly recalcitrant. We finally worked our way up the food chain. They refunded our money. There is a problem, but it's happening. I think what Susan is talking about, this is happening. People who know damn good and well they don't have leaks. They've had the plumbers out, they've done all this stuff. And these bills go from $100 a month to $400 just all at once. Get online and look at the water usage. Our neighbor who had this happen, it was showing a spike at 3 a.m. in the morning, but not at no other time during the day. And they're all asleep at 3 a.m. in the morning. He got his bill, well, he was credited. We didn't get our money back, but we didn't have to pay a water bill. Really, like for 4 months, we didn't pay a water bill because we had been overcharged that much shortly after these allegedly smart meters were installed. I think there's a systemic problem with those smart meters that needs to be addressed. Too many people just roll over. They don't fight. It took me 2 trips to the board. Bob Dillo was still there then, and the guy came in with all his charts and all his printouts, and finally got somebody who took care of it. But if you call that office, they're not gonna talk to you. This is the rudest people in the city of Evansville.
Well, I'm sorry that you were treated that way. We certainly
Well,
don't
we
want
got
to
it
do that.
fixed, but the thing is, how many people don't?
Well, I think that's something we certainly can look into on smart
Big
meters.
time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Thank you for bringing it. Yes.
Hello, my name is Brent Jackson, president of the President's Neighborhood Association. Talked a little bit tonight about the possibility of federal grants may be available. Evansville is a area that is a recipient of the Promised Zones Initiative, which is an Obama administration program. It may have carried over all the way to today. We have a lot of our residents are in poverty rates. And I guess my question is in the event we were to be a recipient of these federal grants, would that change any of the outcome of how much each user would pay?
It definitely would. So is that, let's say if we were able to get an 80% federal grant, we had to match our 20%. Then the largest driver of this rate case is this water treatment plant. So it would significantly reduce rates.
Is there a deadline or a period of time in which they're going to start awarding these grants, or we just don't know right now?
We don't know, because I don't believe that program has passed Congress yet.
I see.
So that's coming out of the infrastructure bill that is before Congress and ultimately to the president. So we don't know some of the timeline of those things. Now there's the American Rescue Act money and even some of the CARES Act money that I think that should start trickling down to local municipalities. But that's really smaller and not kind of on the grant that we would really need.
Is there a possibility that in the event that the IURC approves the request and then the federal funding come later?
There is, in which case, what that would do is we wouldn't, I mean, the driver on this is we have to borrow quite a bit of money to make these improvements. So we wouldn't borrow the money. So therefore our debt service, which is what causes the rates to go up, is we have to pay the money back. We would be borrowing significantly less, which would change the rate. So we wouldn't need to raise the rate because we wouldn't have the debt to service.
We also talked tonight about sourcing water.
Mhm.
Back when Mike was leading the charge a little bit, we talked about sourcing water. There was a study that was going on where you guys were looking at out towards Angel Mounds area, where you were drilling and checking the soil and water saturation. Have we ended that search? Because it sounds like you made a decision, you've moved on. Where are we going to get our water? Is it still coming from the Ohio River? Are we looking at other sources?
Yeah, the 2 sources that we had as options were groundwater or surface water. We currently take from the Ohio River. And we did, over an extensive period of time, some folks would say we took too long to continue to look for groundwater. But we really thought there would be groundwater in an amount that we needed to be able to at least blend with the surface water to make us a more resilient community when it came to drinking water. And after 3 years of looking, we just simply could not find enough that made it economically cost beneficial to go get the smaller amounts of water in more than just a couple of spots. So, so the proposal we sent up to the IURC for consideration is a full surface water plant, continuing to take water from the Ohio River exclusively.
So that brings me to my next question. As you know, the Ohio River is a known source of pollutants. And we have often seen where a spill will happen. And sometimes we can react to it. But there are hundreds of chemicals that are added to the river. Some I've learned that we've discovered after the fact. Will the new plant have better testing abilities? Will we expand the amount of chemicals we test for? And go ahead, maybe you already got the answer.
So we'll continue to test for the chemicals that we test for today. What we did in lieu of that, and in lieu of really direction of what to make sure we don't have in our water, we added to our treatment cycle newer technologies that take out those contaminants, at least most of those contaminants. So we're improving the quality of our treatment train to make sure that our water quality stays better, as good or better than what we have today. So we still have the ability for emergency charcoal, but we also will have other treatments. And the treatment type escapes me right now. I wish I could tell you what it is, but it's just it's an additional treatment train to the filtration and clarification that we have proposed.
Sorry to monopolize the time. I have one more comment or question here. Right now, you can pay your bill through an app or online, and you can receive notifications for those payments. Right now, if you pay your bill in advance, even though you paid your bill in advance, it will still send you a notice that you owe $0. Is there a way to turn those off?
I would talk to my staff that runs that. I'm not sure about that. I do know this, that we are ever trying to change the way we can serve everyone. And so our water app and our website, the online process on which you interact with us, we are working to improve that process. But that's a great, Ella wrote that down, I think, so we got to check into that.
If it does pass, when can we expect this new water treatment plant to start being built? And also, as far as the pipes, you're talking about we need to replace the pipes, when is that going to start? Is that with the plant? Is that before the plant, after the plant?
So I'll take the first one on when. Assuming we get approval, we would probably hear back from them. Like I said, they'll have, from the middle of December, they'll have 90 days to give us a ruling. So somewhere between December and March, we will hear back from the IURC as to whether they approved our request. And then we will be able to start moving the garage and start that process. So however long it takes us to find a place for the garage and get them moved and then get that site cleared, then we'll begin construction. And I believe it's 3 years once we start construction, might give or take. Middle of 2025, we would hope that it would be online and producing water. And then on your second question, so we've paused that refresh program. We do have some projects that are related to refresh that are tied to road projects that we know will happen over the next 5 years that the state or the county or the city is going to be doing. And so we want to make sure that when they have the roads torn up, we get in and do the things we need to do so we don't tear up their roads again a year later. And so we've reserved some funding for that, but the aggressive program of really trying to get out there and get our system replaced will go on pause. Because as we mentioned, it's an affordability problem. So this plant's crucial. This plant needs to be replaced. At that point, we can kind of look at, all right, how do we want to do it 15 miles a year? That's kind of what we were targeting. Do we look at it and say, you know what, level of service that we can provide our customers, married with the cost, let's ratchet that way back, but still go at it systematically. So we'll look at that and continue looking at that now, but we'll kind of, once the plant is online, then that would be the next decision. Very good question, thank you.
I was going to tag on what Brent says. We pay electronically, we pay our bill electronically. And every month we get a paper statement that says we paid last month and here's this month's bill, along with an envelope.
Thank you for letting me know that. That's obviously an inefficiency that we would love to address, so I'll look into that as well. Yes, sir.
Okay, when y'all first started the business sewer project mandated by the government, Mike often gave us a breakdown of what everything costs. Now, he gave us nothing concerning what the bill is for this project.
Sure. Mike, you want to take the project? I mean, I haven't.
If you miss, I'll back you up.
The water plant is slated to be constructed in 3 to 5 phases. We're trying to do it smartly, like Lane mentioned, move the garage and stuff. So we're looking at 5 separate contracts, may total $150 million to get that done over that 3.5 year period.
So the construction they're doing now over there, is that not part of you guys?
Yeah, so it is us, but it's the sewer side of us.
Okay.
That's the
And
effluent
that's
pump
the same thing
station.
that's going on over the west side.
Pardon?
Yes.
West side is also sewer side?
Yeah, we actually have 2 projects at the west plant that total about $66 million that are just right at the end of construction. And that was to expand the plant to the required amount, as well as to create a 6 million gallon holding tank. So that sewage didn't go to Carpenter Creek, that it would fill the holding tank instead, and we would route that through the plant for treatment. And then our east plant just started its construction project, and that's to expand its capacity as well from 26 million gallons a day up to 40 million gallons a day. That's at a price tag of $50 million. It's about 25% done. And then probably the most visible project you see is the effluent pump station, which takes the waste, the treated water from the east plant and pumps it over and into the Ohio River in lieu of dumping it in B slough. And that's, putting it in B slough like we have for decades is kind of the cause of the summer stink. So moving that water directly to the Ohio River will help mitigate that issue.
All 3 of those projects are major projects that are part of the incentive. So those are the things that the federal government has asked us to do to ensure that we capture any overflows. So it's an investment we have to make, and it's good for our system, it's good for our city, but it doesn't really address, a lot of the sewer pipes that are out in our system as well.
Okay, I think that's one. Is the new proposed plant, is there gonna be a capacity change, an overall capacity?
So we're recommending a capacity reduction right now, actually. So on paper, we have a permit to make about 60 million gallons of water a day. The reality of that is we can't really make more than 42 million gallons of water a day in our current facility. Our max day has been in the mid-30s on the really hot days or really cold days where we have a lot of leaks or breaks in our water lines. So we're proposing to put back a plant that can make 50 million gallons a day. So that lines up with our max days as well as our average days. Our average day right now is about 22 to 23 million gallons.
The overflow to B slough, when is that gonna occur? And I guess you're gonna flood the land there eventually, right? Or am I thinking wrong?
I don't fully understand your question.
Yeah, so at the end of the year is when this plant should come online. And what's actually happened, so when we finish treating the water, and this is where you jump in and make sure you get the technical stuff right, I don't mess it up, but right now what happens is that we're finished with the water, we treated, we've taken the waste out, and we're putting it back toward the river, but the way in which that happens is it goes back into B slough. So it creates a backup in B slough, and then every time there's an overflow or a rain event, then that sort of stagnates in B slough, and that's what creates the stink. So what we're now gonna do is we're gonna pump the water, so we're gonna run a pipe from the plant, the east treatment plant, under the ground to this new pump station, in which case then we will pump it, and there's a pipe that runs out of that to the levee. You'll see, and this will be public space that people can kind of see. We're actually excited for for the public once it opens, because it's on the riverfront. But you'll be able to walk out, and there'll be a cascade down, and you'll be going into the river that way. So that's what it's, rather than putting it into Evansville where it backs up and stagnates, we're gonna keep it flowing right into the river. Did I say that marginally correct?
So in addition to that, so now that we're taking the 26 million gallons of treated water out of Evansville a day and putting it into Ohio River ourselves, we also gave ourselves the ability, we put inlets in Evansville. So once the waste treatment plant is not at capacity after a rain event, we can open those inlets and we can start draining Evansville. So that sewage not only is lesser volume, we can keep it moving and keep it bringing as much to the plant for full treatment, just to kind of allow less and less combination sewer overflow to go septic and stagnant there. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, but you all may know this.
You made a way. Wells Fargo is proud to be on your side as you keep
The combination sewer overflow, you hear that CSO, that language that the federal government asked us to take care of. Like many cities, Evansville was no different in that when the city was first built and sewer systems were put in, the stormwater and the sanitary, there was only one system. So it's called the combined system. For Evansville, it's 2/3 of our system falls within the combined system. So every time there was a rain event, pipes that were meant and largely built to hold sewage and take it to the plant, whenever there would be a lot of water coming in, it would what we call supercharge the pipes. There was more fluid than the pipes could hold. So to avoid that water has to go somewhere. Well, where it would have gone had there not been these overflow, it would have gone to the back of houses. It would have backed up into houses because it's got to go somewhere and it's going to find the release, right? So to avoid it from backing up into homes, the system has these overflow. And so when it hits a certain amount, we would allow that to flow out into Pigeon Creek or other creeks in the river to ensure that it didn't back up. And that's what happens is the rainwater mixes with the sewer and it creates, contaminated water that's going into fresh water sources. And so the federal government asked us to clean that up. And so that's when you hear CSO and the work that we're doing, that's largely what we're trying to do.
Are you done,
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm gonna stand up because I want to be able to see my friend Dan Armstrong. Good to see you. I'm Pam Martin with University South Neighborhood Association, and I also work with the Evansville Social Justice Network and a new group that we organized called Evansville is Tapped Out to resist the rate increase that we are learning about this evening. Lane, I noticed when you got to the numbers page, you started out by saying, you'll hear that this is a 30% increase, and then you went through numbers. But what is the percentage that you're working with? Tell us the percentage if it's not 30.
It is 30.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we are, okay.
But what I was trying to show on that was just to show that it's not 30% of your bill.
It's
What-
30. I
It's,
understand.
and the reason I say that is because a lot of people have asked me that question,
I
and I've talked about it, and feel overwhelmed that it's gonna be 30% of the total bill.
It's 30% of the water side of your bill.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to understand that since 2016, next to veteran, the water bills have been the biggest topic of conversation in the city. And not just while we were getting to 25% poverty in the city, this has caused an onerous burden on the citizens in Evansville, onerous. And since 2016, and all of the work we've talked about, our bills have gone up 77%. 77% since 2016. Correct?
I don't know, I have not looked at that, so.
I added it up from all of the materials on the utility website and handouts from the previous rate request. So if we add 30% onto 77, and we stretch this 30 out,
5 years, from the end of this year or the first of next year, whenever you get it approved. That would be 107% in 11 years. And to say that to think that that doesn't have an impact on the quality of life in the city is ignoring the facts. There are people now that have to choose between medicine and paying for water. We are working with, we've already contacted the Office of the Utility Consumer Council, and we're working with them to gather information. And I'd encourage everyone in every neighborhood to talk to people who are having a hard time and getting their information together, either getting it, sharing it with a contact that I can give you, or planning on coming to the hearing on October the 12th. We believe it will be in Evansville because of the size of the increase they're asking for. I work with Reverend William Payne, who does a lot of work in the inner city and a lot of programs. And it is not simply because we want to be the naysayers. It is that this is a horrible burden. And it's all very well and good. I'm glad you didn't say, folks, we could be without water any day, because we think this is really an emergency. It's a funding source looking for an emergency. I think that this, coupled with what the president is doing in Washington, is forcing the issue and causing us to look at greater expense in a time period that is on the heels of the worst part of the pandemic, which is another thing we have to recognize that people are dealing with, and it's making life really hard. And also recognize the fact that 56% of the students in our school system participate in the free lunch program because of their income. Now, that's not the number who are eligible. That's the number who participate, 56%. We are not a wealthy city, and we have parts of the city that are really struggling. We have neighbors who are really struggling. We have elderly neighbors who are afraid to flush their toilets more than one time a day because of what it will do to the water bill. So and those are the things we're going to tell the Office of the Utility Consumer Council, because this is really a burden. Yeah, I appreciate your detail. I really believe that you have in your heart the commitment to serving the people of Evansville, but I think you'll do a great service if you recognize that in addition to needing water, we have a lot of needs. We can get our bread and milk and cheese from Aldi or the neighborhood Walmart, and we can compare prices. But we can only get our water from you, and we are forced to pay what you charge. So I think that's the message that we have, that there is also one of the avenues we're going to pursue is tiered rate structure depending on income and poverty level in certain census tracts. Philadelphia does this, I believe. And also in 2017, the Indiana General Assembly enabled the Utility Regulatory Commission to adopt a policy to allow utilities to adopt a policy recognizing the unaffordability of rates. And it would build an assistance program within the rate structure. And that is possible in Indiana, and we're going to ask the regulators to do that. You didn't have any information about assistance for people who can't pay their bills. And that is really what is at the heart of every neighborhood. So I appreciate your time.
Well,
And I know you've heard this before.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
And you'll hear it again.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I'm happy to stick around, but let me just say this. I just saw the weather radar, and there's a storm that's about to hit us. So I may wrap up I think they would like us to wrap up this part of it, but I am happy to stick around.
If I just ask one thing.
Sure.
You are new in this job. You are. So please don't take this personally. What I'm going to say is reflective of what's happened up till now. But ever since the mandate, the water department folks have been driving around in very new vehicles. And every time you drive by a work site, you see a very large crew, some of which are working, the others are watching. I don't have confidence that the money we're giving the water department right now is being well spent. And I don't think I'm alone in the city in feeling that. I would respectfully ask for an independent financial and efficiency audit of the water department before we go forward with any more increases.
Well, I would be glad to look into that. We want to operate. Like you said, I am new. So one of the things I am doing is looking through everything that we do in our budget and trying to understand where it goes, how we spend it, how can we do it efficiently. So I appreciate that comment and we'll certainly take that on the back. Yeah, you're welcome.
Since this sewer mandate, what's the percentage, how much has it went up from shut off?
How often are people getting their water cut? What percentage of people are getting their water cut?
It's largely remained the same. It spiked a little bit when COVID, in the middle of COVID, kind of right that first summer, and then we worked out payment arrangements with people, and then it kind of went back down. It's steady. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I know that it's sort of remained steady. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Labitzke, and also Mrs. Mazzella. Sorry. Okay. We're gonna wrap this up. We have a Spark Plug Committee meeting on Tuesday at 5:30. We have a Finance Committee meeting on following Tuesday, June 8th at 5:30. Do I have a motion? We also have Center Point Energy. I'm sorry, that's not on the agenda tonight.
It's not, and that's fine. So they can stop by the table.
Do you have any, if you'd like to stop by the table to speak to Center Point? We're about to get some storms. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Adjourn. Thank you.